I'm Amanda Tainter. I am the coach's president, and I'm joined by our founding director, Jarek Janjo. Jarek, you want to introduce yourself? I think you're the only coach here.
Yep. Good morning. Yes. If we have more coaches joining us, then we'll certainly let them introduce themselves as well. My name is Jarek Janjo. I'm from Santa Ana College in Southern California, School of Continuing Education, ESL Department Chair, and coaches founding director. Yes. Thank you very much, Amanda.
Yep. And I am
Go ahead.
from Reedley College. I'm the outcomes coordinator. If you don't know the little town of Reedley, we're in the Central Valley of California. Both Jarek and I will be monitoring the chat today, and I'll also post a Padlet link if you want to post anything, questions anonymously. We'll pull from those as well. Both of our speakers have said, please ask questions as we go along, and we'll unmute, or you can raise your hand. There's quite a few of us to be able to ask questions throughout the presentation. Today's presentation will also be posted on the coach's website. We'll make sure and pop that link in the chat as well. And there's all of our previous presentations, as well as other useful information and resources can be found on the coach's website. So Jarek, I'll hand it over to you to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you. Good morning. First of all, we are very much honored to introduce Dr. Kristen Linton, an Associate Professor of Health Science and the Academic Assessment Director at California State University, Channel Islands. Dr. Linton has an extensive background in social work and virtual reality interventions, particularly focused on rehabilitation among people with brain injuries. She collaborates closely with local nonprofits and hospitals to enhance her research and its impacts. Today, Dr. Linton will share her pioneering work on how artificial intelligence, specifically ChatGPT, can be utilized to analyze longitudinal assessment data effectively. Her presentation will cover the innovative use of AI to identify trends and draft comprehensive reports for continuous program improvement. Dr. Linton, thank you very much again for joining us. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to open a PowerPoint. And then Jarek and Amanda, I realize I'm going to have that PowerPoint open. So if there are questions, definitely, I guess, pipe in, because I can't, it's hard to see both. Thank you.
No problem.
Absolutely.
We'll let you know. Absolutely.
That's our job.
Okay, great. Okay, so honestly, this past year, I've gotten into using AI a lot, specifically GPT, ChatGPT, but I purchased GPT-4, and there are different ways to purchase GPT-4. So I buy it on my own, honestly, because I just wanted to explore and be more knowledgeable on it. And I'll discuss this a little bit more. There's a $20 a month option and a $25 a month option. And the more expensive one allows you to have more privacy of your data that you might be dealing with in that. And so that would be essential for us using student data. You could de-identify the data before uploading it, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later if you wanted the cheaper option. So I have been using it in my teaching. As Jarek said, I'm an associate professor, so I teach as well at CSU Channel Islands. But I'm also part-time as our faculty academic assessment director. So at the very end, I'm going to mention ways that I've actually integrated AI into my teaching. But to start, I will be talking about how to analyze Canvas outcomes and assessment data in general efficiently using GPT-4 AI application. All right. Okay, so I want to start off with a question for you all to write in the chat. What amount of your faculty struggle with any of the following? So would you say just a few, some, or most faculty struggle with data analysis tools, understanding data, maybe having to pay for data analysis help? I'm going to peek at the chat so I can see what's going on. Most. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for answering, you guys. Yeah. So same thing. I like the all caps, most. Yeah. So, yeah. So last semester, I was gone on sabbatical, and data analysis is scary. So said, okay, for your own self, Sue, or for other faculty, maybe most understand the data once they have it. It's getting it prepped. Yeah, good point, Helen. Thank you. So I was one of those people at some point in my life. Math did not come natural to me as a kid. I struggled with like multiplication as a young kid. And then for whatever reason in high school, like algebra was my favorite thing. It's so weird. It just clicked. And I try to tell my students that, and maybe even other faculty, that it didn't come natural to me either. And now it's my thing. I'm hired. I became the academic assessment director because I commonly helped with evaluation in the community for community health organizations and hospitals, and helped them with program evaluation and assessment. And I was like, I can totally apply that to the educational setting. And I applied for this position 5 years ago. So I've been doing it for 5 years. And there's some more chat. Charlie said data analysis where they dig deep to make use of the results rather than only repeating the results. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. So last semester when I was gone, I had been running a lot of programs analyses for them from Canvas outcomes. And I'll talk about what that is just in case anyone doesn't know what that is in just a bit. I was analyzing the data for them and creating like a little report for them, because that's something that, to my knowledge, it doesn't do well for us. It just kind of gives you raw data. And then when I was gone, this program did not know how to do it on their own. And then they had to pay for someone, and I just felt so bad. So even though I think like it's in an Excel or some kind of spreadsheet, it's pretty easy to run some basic data analyses in there. It's not basic to everyone. So what if faculty could show the data to someone, chat with them in their own language. And when I say their own language, kind of their own style and their own knowledge of analysis and what it means to analyze data, and tell them what they want to learn from the data. The other person suggests and conducts analyses and addresses issues with the data, such as combining data. They identify replication or measurement issues, such as measurements not being measured the same way over time. They could even provide a summary of results. Until now, that person is most likely us, or it was me, is me still. And maybe many of you could relate to being that person that does a lot of this. Yeah. Yeah, and thank you, Cynthia wrote in the comments, many may not know how to use Excel. That is correct, yeah. And I teach a research methods class in health science undergraduate, and I always tell students, like I have them do basic analyses. We use Google Sheets, which is pretty similar to Excel, and I tell them this is basic, like knowledge that's good for your life in general, not just health science in your career. But so what if from now on, instead of it being us, it could be AI? Specifically, today I'll talk about GPT-4. There is another application that I know of, and probably even more than that, but that I will mention at the end, that can also do this for you as well, that I know of today, but I'm sure there'll be more and more over time that can do it. Okay. Was there a question? No. Okay. So today we'll discuss Canvas outcomes. So just in case, but any data can be analyzed that is in a spreadsheet or raw data format. It's relevant to today's presentation, so it doesn't have to be Canvas outcomes data. It could be any assessment data or research data on the research side. I have also used this to analyze other data. So like I said, I'm a program evaluator for local organizations. And a lot of times they have paired samples, longitudinal data, so kind of tracking an outcome over time for certain individuals. They'll be in separate data sets because we'll have like a pre-survey and a post-survey format, and it's collected over time. And then because of grant money and government money given to these organizations, they have to report these outcomes regularly, just like we do in education. And I myself would have to combine the data like quarterly, which takes time, go and match them for the pre-survey data with the post-survey data. And let me tell you, like, that's not fun. Like, that part isn't fun. I like doing the analysis, but like taking the time to do that is really time consuming. And I say a lot of times that people won't enter their name the same way or the ID exactly correctly. So it does require some like manpower to do that. So I've had GPT-4 combine the data and match it for me based on ID and analyze the data. Stephanie just wrote in the chat that ChatGPT is famous for making mistakes and like that hallucination piece. So GPT-4 was specifically designed for analysis. So if you haven't tried it, I get this criticism a lot from other people who are just using ChatGPT. I feel like it is different in a lot of ways. GPT-4 allows you to upload the data too. So I don't know how I would have ChatGPT analyze the data without uploading the actual raw data into it. So I just wanted to respond to that in the chat, that I'm using something different than ChatGPT, if that makes sense. And then in addition, when I first started doing this, I would check my work. So because I also had like some of this concern. So I had it run like some power analyses for me, for example, and then I would run them on my own in my statistical software and kind of check my work. Okay. So yeah, okay. Okay. So just to review really quick of Canvas, let me speak at the chat, checking your work. Okay, checking your work makes a lot of sense, Jarek said. Okay, there's a lot going on in the chat.
Yeah, we can interrupt you with
do it later.
questions if you want. Yeah, there's always that back channel talk. So definitely
Yeah,
want
okay,
to keep
okay.
up.
So
We'll make sure to interrupt you if there's a question.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'll just review Canvas outcomes just in case you're not familiar, but I think a lot of people have discussed it on here before. So it's a tool within Canvas LMS that allows for ease of program assessment data collection across course sections, semester, and years. Canvas outcomes rubrics are developed by faculty and then can be used in multiple course sections by various instructors in various semesters and years. And then the data can be downloaded into spreadsheets. Honestly, I started promoting this probably in like 2020 at our university. I found that a lot of the other assessment tools were external to Canvas. And so it was like more work on the instructor side. And like, we just don't need that on the instructor side, and people weren't going to do it. So I felt like on the instructor side, there's a lot of ease to using Canvas outcomes. But on the data analysis side, I would say, it's not going to create the report for you like a lot of other external tools would. When it comes to cross semester data. And a lot of times or cross course section data. And that's a lot of times what we're wanting. Okay, so GPT-4, this is a large language model that can read and process uploaded spreadsheets of data and has data analysis capabilities. It uses Python coding capabilities for most of the data analysis functions. And then I talk here about that paid service. So there's the free ChatGPT that a lot of people are using. And then there's a $20 a month for a personal account. And in this account is still going to be kind of using your data and learning from it. Thus, you should be de-identifying your data before you enter it. If you pay for the $25 a month professional account, it enables private information, and then the GPT is not learning from it and taking that information and saving it, if that makes sense. And so that would be the one you'd want to use if you're trying to like do what I did where I had like pre and post data and I wanted it to go match it for me and not de-identify it first. Then you'd want to have like the most expensive one, I guess. But for Canvas outcomes data, I feel like you could de-identify it before and then put it in there for the $20 a month one. Okay. And obviously those numbers could have changed on like how much it is to pay for them, but I just thought I'd share that. Okay, so this begins my tutorial of kind of how I went about and used GPT-4 to analyze the Canvas outcomes data. So I wanted to give like a little preview of what the data looks like when you pull it from Canvas outcomes. So it gives you a lot of different information. One of the things it gives you is each row is an individual student. It gives you the course number, and then it gives you like what that learning outcome was that they were looking at, and then an outcome score, a lot of different information. But I was going to focus on the outcome score and just looking at changes of outcome score by semester in a specific course. So this course is a research methods class that I teach, and several instructors in my program and I also use the same rubric. And so we are able to do program assessment across the program, which is lovely, using Canvas outcomes. And I'm going to show you that I had like 3 semesters worth of data to analyze for this tutorial. So I uploaded the data sets into GPT-4 and I asked it, I entered a specific prompt. And I feel like prompting in AI is like its own skill that we have to learn. And so I try to be like as transparent as possible on exactly what I said to it and how the conversation went. And so I kind of highlighted some things that I thought were important. And so I said, hi, because I like to talk to it like it's a person. Can you help me to create a frequency table of results using the attached data? And then I attached the 3 semesters worth of data. And then I'm kind of giving it context. And I said, for just Health 309 methodological literature review assessment, can you create a frequency table of outcome scores? So I'm telling it the outcome scores are what I'm interested in. Defining scores by the learning outcome ratings. Again, defining like I'm only interested in this thing. The frequency table should include, so what am I really wanting it to tell me? The number of each score and the percentage of each score based on the total sample. And then I tell it to use data from the 3 semesters, please. I feel like if you are not specific, like if I didn't tell it, like I want all 3 years, it'll just analyze like, it'll just do like 1, so you have to be like really specific. And then even after that, like if you don't get what you want, I've learned just keep going back to it and bug it, be like, nope, that's not what I was looking for. Can you try again? It takes time for it to learn you and you to learn how to communicate with it, I feel like. So this is what it gave me originally. So it gave me 3 different tables, 1 for each semester and year. And that's not really what I was looking for. Like if I were to create a table, I'd have it side by side with the years side by side. And so I went back to it and I was like, hey, that's not what I was looking for, except I was more positive. I said, excellent, thank you. Can you place all 3 years of data side by side so that the ones line up next to each other, 2s line up next to each other, etc. So that's what it did. So it's a little cut off because it was a big table, but I wanted to show you what it gave me next. And I was happy with this. And I feel like I could probably cut some of these, like just make it a little bit easier to read, I felt like, but overall it was helpful. And then you can usually copy and paste them into Word doc. That's something to know. If it ever gives you a table that it won't let you do that, you can ask it, can you save this to a PDF? Can you save it to a .png for me? And then it will give you a link to open and open that elsewhere. And so I love that. And then the last thing that was pretty awesome that I've actually asked it to do this in different ways, but was I asked it to create a summary report. So I said, can you identify trends in the data from the table of all 3 years that you created? Can you create a written summary of the results? So GPT, if you guys might know, it loves like bullet points and it loves to kind of identify these kinds of things. So it told me that there was stability and high performance, the majority achieving average to good, which kind of the opposite of that, there were minimal below average scores. It talked about how like we didn't use a 0 point the first semester. This one, I mean, I wasn't like that impressed. There wasn't anything new that I didn't know, but I'll tell you, I was writing a grant to National Institute of Health, and I uploaded my grant into it because you have to kind of share like a million times, how is your study going to be different or new? So I had already come up with my ways that I thought it'd be new, but I thought, let me see what GPT says. And like, it came up with awesome ideas that I hadn't thought of, and that was super cool. So just throwing that out there. Yeah. So, like I said, like this isn't the only app that can do it, and maybe someday I would feel comfortable with the more free versions doing it, but who knows? So, there is an app called Narrativa AI that works with a lot of health organizations. They have a pay-per-use report model that's $5 per report. And then what's cool about theirs is if you have a data set that's like updated regularly and it's live in like a Google Doc, it can analyze that data for you on a regular basis. Like you could say, can you do the quarterly reports for me if that's updated? And I had gone to a demo on that, so I thought I'd share that with you guys. But I feel like it's relevant to the education setting as well, even though none of their examples were education, but then it also would create reports, and it could create like all different kinds of reports for you, like social media, news media, like report for funding, things like that. So I thought that was cool.
And Dr. Linton, we did have a question from Paige, which is how to validate results within GPT-4. So Paige, please feel free to unmute if you wanted to elaborate on that, or that was the extent of the question.
Hi, this is Paige. My question is for how to validate the result within GPT-4. Like we know that GPT-4 can do some calculation analysis for the data we provided, but how do you make sure the calculation is always good, always right? Like there's anything missing, or they pick up some of the data information? I was just from data perspective.
Yeah, I feel like I have run the data on my own before, like I said, like I'm not doing it every single time, but I think you could. I mean, I don't know. Okay, so like I feel like I don't question my statistical software every time. So why would I question AI every time? Like once I guess I will admit that once I felt comfortable, like, okay, I've tested you already and seen that you are reliable. Now I'm comfortable, like just kind of trusting, because I don't question my statistical software that does my analyses for me a lot, if that makes sense. So I guess over time I felt comfortable, like, all right, you're trustworthy source to do this for me, but everybody's going to have their own comfort level in that. And I think it's just running the analysis, how you would traditionally do it. Maybe you do it in Google Sheets or Excel or a statistical software, and then run it in GPT-4 and see if those are getting the same results, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. I think this is it will be easier to trust if we just run some descriptive analysis. If there's a big bunch of like huge data sets, and then if you run some high advanced analysis, then I would challenge the coding, whether the coding is valid. So it would be good they have some validation process, or like we have to do it human.
Yeah. And I haven't had it do anything that advanced, I will tell you. I mean, I would say, yeah, nothing that advanced, because I will use, I feel like for my assessment role, I'm not doing, I'm not like, I would say our institutional data people here are the ones that would do more advanced data analysis for this, for education data, but I'm mostly helping people analyze like before and after, or compare different semesters data, so nothing too advanced. And then even for my my research, my own research, I'm going to use my statistical software for probably more advanced stuff. So
Lenny Locke from Manhattanville University. I'm thinking perhaps a sample could be pulled from the GPT-4 results, and then go back and look at the actual data from which it was derived and see if, there's any discrepancies in that regard. So as you were saying, to, use the whole population, I think that would be, rather cumbersome, but it may be possible even just to take a small number and kind of trace back and see how it relates to the, actual data from which it was supposedly derived. One other point would be, I would be suspect, I suppose, if, like in the example that you gave, where there was a large swing in results across semesters. Now, I know the group of students can certainly vary, but if in one case, I'm just making this up, it was like 10, and then the next case it was like 100, then it would be like something transpired in the conversion of the data. So just a couple ideas to kind of perhaps double check that it is reflecting the actual valid results.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, I've had it also, like, I asked it, show me your work, like you would ask a student. I was doing that when I had it do it power analysis for me. So I was curious, like, what equation was it using? So that was kind of cool. And it did. Like, sometimes you have to probe it a little bit, like, tell me more, show me the exact equation, like what were the numbers you plugged in. But yeah, I will do that too, which is helpful in the transparency piece.
Vernon, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, and so did I understand correctly, just the export data, the raw data from Canvas outcomes that you would run, that will work just fine? You don't have to do anything with that file?
No, I didn't do anything. Yeah. So I just plugged it in, and then, you just have to tell it which variable that you're wanting it to analyze for you.
And then have you, this looks like it might be similar to Sophia's question in the chat. Have you asked it to take that analysis and visualize it, like with a line graph or a bar graph?
Yeah, it can do that. That's a good point. I didn't do it for this. I did have it. I've had it do line for my own research for line charts. So yeah, it can do that. I didn't for this purpose, but yeah, when she said dashboards, actually, Sophia, I'm curious if it was a little bit different question. Like, I was thinking, because we have dashboards that are like interactive dashboards, because GPT can do coding, right? So like, that is not my background, but that would be super cool if it could create like interactive dashboards, is what I read when I read your question. Honestly, I was like, oh, that's a whole nother level. That's beyond me, but that's a cool idea too, because it can do coding, which is what's necessary to create those. So maybe that's down the road, or someone else can explore that if that's your expertise. But yeah, it can do visuals. You could tell it what you want. You can even ask it like to change the colors. And I've had it do that. Like I had a line chart showing like different individual scores on something. And I had, I wanted each one a different color. So yeah.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to reiterate that that's the GPT-4, because I know a lot of people have played around with 3, and like Dr. Linton, you had elaborated before, there's a vast difference. So this is all 4. I mean, it's just like it's astronomical leap between the two. So I know you had stated it before, but just in case anybody missed it, I just wanted to reiterate this is all GPT-4.
Yeah. Someone said they only use ChatGPT, didn't use GPT. Create visuals. You can ask it to create code for you. Yeah, to run in R or SPSS. Yeah, very cool.
When we're talking about validating data, one of the things that I've done to cross-check, and it sounds weird, and I do other ways as well, but use different forms, a different model. So I've used Claude, Gemini, and then GPT-4, and see how well their answers align if I'm looking at data. And yeah, I'm validating with AI, but it's been interesting to see the different responses and the very similar responses on some of those. So that's been kind of fun. But I don't have the paid version of Claude or Gemini, so I acknowledge that.
And Gemini, last time I checked, wouldn't let you upload. And so I'm like, well, how does it, I get that you copy and paste, but that seems weird with like raw data. I don't know how I would do that. But if anybody else has done that, let me know. I like the idea of just uploading it. Yeah. Okay.
I think you can upload images to Gemini from what I see. I don't know if you can actually upload a file to be analyzed. But I just wanted to bring up one point that I think links to your discussion of the fact that it's really a discussion. You made the point quite clearly that of the importance of making sure that we understand, that we check, that we validate, everything needs to be there. But this can be achieved by asking questions. It's not like Google kind of a thing, right? That you ask a question and then you have 15 million choices. It's more of a conversation, almost like with a human being. And when you think about it, when we talk to among ourselves, we understand by default our limitations, right? In a sense that we know what fields we can discuss. Whereas with ChatGPT, we have this entity that has access to gazillions of artifacts, and I think it's difficult for us to relate to this because it overgeneralizes things. I think you said that too, right? It just kind of like answers everything and anything under the sun. So there is this feature in ChatGPT called My GPTs, and that's under you have to kind of like click on your little icon, I guess, or that your name at the bottom of the screen, at least in my case, and then they show up there, and those the prompts or prompt organizers, maybe that way. So you have a discussion on a topic, and after 15-20 minutes, sorry, you can't continue, you can save it, you can give it a name, and then a day or two later, or whenever later in the future, you can continue that. And I think that's very, very, very helpful. It really helps you organize those discussions because ChatGPT is going to remember this is discussion about X, Y, and Z, and this is a discussion about A, B, C kind of a thing. So that's very, 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 very helpful. It certainly helps me, organize things in the way that I need them organized. And David is, let me see here. David is talking about the course that he is analyzing, right? David, would you like to please talk about your project a little bit?
And Yark, Vernon had his hand raised too. I didn't know if you noticed that.
Sorry, Vernon. Go right ahead, please.
So I'm not familiar with all the different fields in the raw data that you would export, but I'm interested in how you would know what changed. So from one semester to one semester, not just the results, but what changed on the instructional level. Like, are they using a different assessment, a different assignment, different methods? Would it be able to track that and add that to the analysis?
So the data shows you like which assignment, what the assignment name was that it was used for. So like within our program and most programs, like we design our assessment based on a specific assignment. So there's consistency there, but you could definitely, we have some general education courses, that GE courses that are using GE rubrics that are based on our outcomes, and they might have different assignments. So you could tell it like, to look at just one assignment, because that's what I would want to track, just that one assignment, and then those assessments over time versus both. Like if they're different assignments, it can get kind of messy if you're pretty separated, I guess, from the teaching, right? Like if you're just an administrator on assessment side. But I think then that's why, like, if you separated it by the assignment, when it's analyzing the data for you, and then you give that back to those people who are teaching and kind of ask them to help interpret, then they know, right, what changed or didn't. So that's.
And could you just would you just ask it to identify that in the analysis as well as like a separate or to add context to what the results are tied to?
Yeah. On the prompt side at the beginning, you would have to tell it, analyze only this assignment, or separate the analyses by assignment or something like that. A lot of times when I'm doing an analysis, I like to remove, I guess, each assignment or each assessment, or each program, because I'll do like reports for certain programs for GE, for health science, for early childhood or something, right? So I'm just like separating the data, but you could just tell it only analyze this data or one assignment at a time.
Okay.
So yeah, it is a part of the prompting and specifically telling it what to do.
David, if you could please, yeah, do share your experience. Would be very, very timely to hear what it is that you've been doing.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm pretty new to using these type of tools, like literally in the last few months. And start off with Copilot, found that the free version of that at least quite wanting in terms of the results. Tried Gemini, that was a bit better. And then we were able to get through our school, get a subscription to GPT-4, which seemed to be a world of difference in just responding better to the prompts, more thoughtful responses. So I guess now we're kind of looking at what are the other tools out there in terms of, but what the project was look, we have a free, it's an online asynchronous non-credit course for new students to help them adjust to the first year of college life. So study skills, how to communicate with your instructors, student services, etc. So we had like all this data, about 500 pages, and trying to think how could we intelligently analyze that to see what the students like, what they dislike, and what they would add to the course. So we're kind of like, how do you deal with all that? And really, what are the prompts? Going through several prompts, and then what do you really want to get out of the data? So we're looking now at what are other tools, possibly even within ChatGPT. Like I just learned there's some survey tools specifically. And then how to present it when I think, Kristen, you kind of mentioned that before. How do you present it to maybe other stakeholders too, in a way that they could clearly understand? So like we're trying to consider maybe tables or visuals that might be effective for that. So it's very much a work in process. And so this is really helpful to hear your experiences.
David, in what you're using, are you like writing it up or publishing it? Because I feel like when I first started looking, I'm like looking online to like, what are other people doing and how are they using it? And like, I just think we need to share this more because we're all learning together, how to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're at this point just kind of thinking in-house. So we have like a department, academic success center, it's called. So kind of sharing it in-house. And our first step is actually how are staff using it in their actual day-to-day work and then down the road, looking at the whole teaching learning kind of thing, which seems to be the main focus these days when we talk about it in post-secondary. But yeah, really looking at first analyzing this in our own course, and then we're also looking at how staff could use it too. So using our experiences to share, and maybe that could help others. So yeah, it's very much like I totally agree with you that sharing experiences like this, because it's so new, is just golden, so valuable. Yeah. So maybe we can keep in touch about that.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, write your contact info on the chat. I also want to share, so since I am an instructor, that was kind of the end of my data analysis presentation, but I did want to share like 3 ways that I've been using in my teaching, because it is related, right? So over time, hopefully I'll be able to assess them, these methods of using in my teaching. But one of the ways that I integrated it into a course this semester is that same research methods class that I also showed the assessment data on, but is that students, sometimes they struggle with ideas on things, and I have them basically conduct their own research study in one semester, which is like a big task, and they have to come up with a hypothesis right away. And so I had them use GPT to kind of formulate ideas. And so I had it just come up with like a bunch of different hypotheses. We all look at one broad topic, which is assessing virtual reality on health professionals' education. So it came up with like different hypotheses, ideas, and then I even gave it parameters, and it has to be able to be conducted in one semester, and the sample has to be students. And then it gave up a bunch of ideas, and some students, they don't need it, right? They come up with their own, and that's awesome. But other students, it's just helpful to guide them and think of things. And then the second method that I had students use it was to kind of check their own work before they submit it. And that could be a little controversial, but like if you tell them what prompt, so you have them, like I have them write a hypothesis, for example. And one common thing that I see every semester is like students will submit to me a research question. Well, that's not a hypothesis. And I give them like specific parameters, like this is what I want from the assignment. This is what the hypothesis is. And so I tell them, like, you can go and enter that into ChatGPT and then enter your hypothesis and ask it if you are meeting all of the requirements of the assignment. And then it's kind of like checking it for them. So they've come up with their hypothesis and then they're getting feedback from GPT and then they're submitting to me, hopefully something better. And then I modeled that in class with them. And I found like just modeling it and showing them like how I would use it is helpful. And then the last thing that was kind of cool, I have a really quiet class this semester. Like they do not like to talk in front of the whole class. So I'll do a lot of small groups and try to do like partner exercise and stuff. But I found that when I had like kind of like a quiz or something like in front of the class, like just kind of like I have just this broad question with these multiple choice options, then students would participate. They just don't want to come up with something on their own to say, but if it was just like answering something, they would do that. So I had GPT. I had all of these like threats to internal validity concepts that students had to learn the definitions of. I had GPT develop case examples for me, and then I made like a matching game. I had it, they say, make a matching game for me using the case examples and the threats to internal validity concepts. And then I had, like, we went through it in front of the whole class, but you could do it as an assignment. But anyway, I thought it was cool. Like it basically is helping me be more creative. I feel like, and innovative, and hopefully engaging in my classroom as I teach. So I just wanted to share that with you guys too, because I feel like David was talking about like teaching and learning and using AI in that concept. So I definitely have been exploring that as well.
I had just a quick question. You talked a little bit about the beginning of the importance of the ethical considerations in masking data if you're not using that $25 version. What are some of the other ethical considerations that assessment professionals or instructors should keep in mind when they're using AI like GPT-4 for educational assessment and research?
I think we're all still exploring that, you know, like that's why I said I'm part of a faculty inquiry project on AI this semester, and we're having really good conversations about that. I think a lot of people who haven't tried it are more on the punitive side of like, just don't use it. But honestly, so it depends on your field too. But in my field, I have a colleague who works at Amgen, and that's one of our biggest healthcare employers in Ventura County, where we're located. And Amgen bought GPT-4 for all of the staff and said, use it. We want you to use it. And so I felt like, shoot, I got to teach our students how to use it. I want them to know how, not use it. I want them to know how to use it and help them to be more productive and efficient. So I think that we're still exploring that. But what I told my students this semester is that I did encourage them to use it, but I'm having them start, like if it's a writing assignment, use Google Docs and they'll write like their original piece in it, like they're writing. Don't start with AI, but start writing on your own. And then if you want to plug into AI and make revisions, I can see those revisions they made. So I can kind of see their process. And that's kind of what I'm doing in my class. So we have a hand raised, yep. Alan, and a question in the chat.
Yeah, I put this in the chat and then I was asked to raise a hand and elaborate. So I did so. And I apologize if maybe this was covered elsewhere because I had to step out for a sec. But, you know, I'm new to the ChatGPT-4, but, you know, knowing that it had the analysis capability, I wanted to jump in. And so I paid for it. And one of the first things that I did with it is I had it build some pictures for me. And this was to work with a project that I was doing on the side. And I found this to be a really excellent process to go through to understand, you know, how it interacts with your prompt and also some of the limitations of it, right? So when you're working with visuals and you're asking it to create one, you have something very specific in your head and what you want to create, and you put something in there and you might think that you're being really specific. And inevitably when it produces it, it's going to be a little different, right? And then now you have to decide, all right, was this, outcome still within my parameters, or does it get something wrong? Right. So I had this example where I wanted to have this dam with a water spigot coming out of it with just a little trickle of water. I was doing something for some ag people, and that's always a big, issue of theirs, right? So I'm like, hey, this will be a fun thing to do. And, it had the spigot coming out of the ground with a big flow, right? And you're like, well, I thought I was really specific about what I was asking for you. And so you had to kind of tweak and adjust. And I did some other things where, I had similar, needs to kind of continue to coach. And so, it was really eye-opening to go through some of those to understand that, like, even though I felt like I was being very specific, it didn't always give me what I really wanted. And having that visual made it really clear. And so at the same time, when we're asking it for stuff, if it's not a visual, if it's a report or some type of other output, right? I think it's really important that we have a really good understanding of what we expect it to do and what we want it to create. And so, to go back to that, earlier discussion about validation, but, what you're getting, right? If we don't have a really good expectation of what we're expecting to get out of it, right, then we won't know. And so I think that we have to have that really clear understanding when we're interacting with it so that we can benchmark that and it passes the smell test, right? So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I also love using it for visuals, like especially for research presentations where like I do virtual reality with people's brain injury, and I can't like always show a picture of it, right? I don't want to reveal my participants. So I've had it like make pictures of kind of a pretend person using VR that and it was pretty awesome. I had so much fun. Like I could tell it like I wanted the person to wear jeans and a sweater, and like I don't know, I thought it was cool how specific I could be, but you're right, you have to learn as you go on the prompting. So someone else had questions about like prompting. And I linked a presentation I did to our AI group on campus. That's a little bit different, more about the 3 teaching ways that I've been using it in teaching. And I link actually like exact conversations from GPT in that. So you could see like how I prompted it on kind of more on the teaching side of things.
Yeah, so I think I'm glad you agreed with this, Kristen. I posted in the chat that really sort of like it takes, I guess it's going to still take us time to get used to the idea of asking ChatGPT same questions that we are seeking answers to, right? We've been conditioned and we've got used to the idea of, yeah, I'll Google it, and I'll find it, or I'll go to a YouTube. And even yesterday, I tried to do that. I had a function to do in Excel, and I kept going through those presentations on YouTube. And this is, 10, 15 minutes, 2 minutes, half an hour and a half. I'm like, for crying out loud, when am I going to get to the bottom of this? And then I just thought, what am I thinking? I described the problem in ChatGPT as detailed as I could. I pressed the go button, and what do you know? I got an answer that helped me solve the problem literally in seconds. I was just absolutely amazed. And again, it's just this cultural shift that I think we need to be going through. And I just lived right through it. Perfect experience for me.
One of the more it was creepy at the same time as interesting research study I'd read is GPT's response to emotional pleas, is where it says, I can't do this, or I'm not allowed to do this. And you sweet talk it a little bit. No, I think you can do this. You've done such a great job of analyzing this data. I think you really can do this. And it will, which I have a hard time. I'm putting that in a different part of my brain where I'll think about when I have time. But in the context I was using, I had a graph, and I was trying to make a figure caption for accessibility, and it was a complicated graph. I didn't have the table of data on it, so I was going to have to go through in minutia trying to figure out what these data sets are. I uploaded it and said, hey, can you tell me what the data sets are? And it was, no, I don't have the table. That's not what it should say, really, in that I'm not going to give you accurate information. And so I sweet talked a little bit. I know you can And it did. It spit out some incredibly accurate numbers. So that was one of my experiences, that after reading that article, I did it. I'm going, oh my goodness, this is, again, super duper creepy, but at the same time super duper helpful. So I just wanted to pass that on, that if you have a back and forth conversation, it can act very human like, where if you prop it up a bit, it decides it can do something.
So yeah, I haven't heard that, but I do try to use like, thank you, please, like, excellent, good job. Or that's not really what I'm looking for. Can you try again? Like, I try to be nice to it, even though it's weird, because it's like, it's not a human, but then what you're talking about is it's a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. When I read the article, I thought, I'm gonna give this a try, and it worked. So it was very interesting.
I noticed in ChatGPT-4, one of the more really exciting parts of it is that you can ask it, you can have your prompt, and then you can ask it, what other questions would help you get what I'm looking for? Right. So you're asking it to refine the prompt that you made. And that results some fantastic feedback.
Absolutely, absolutely, Vernon. There's again, this is something that we are just not used to, be doing. But really, yes. What is the question I still haven't asked? Right? What are the areas that are linked to it naturally, or what would be the topics for further exploration? Is there anything in the background that's of interest? And every single time you're going to get, really very, very meaningful responses. And I tell you, it's just sometimes it really is mind-boggling. You just have to keep yourself in check, make sure you're focused, you have your discussion on target at all times. Otherwise, it just mushrooms and just it's like a sprawling intellectual effort. Just fascinating experience, especially if you had too much time on your hand, on Saturdays. That's just fantastic. So thank you. Great. Let me see here. Pedro, would you like to let me see here. Would you like to elaborate on your point? I don't ask it. That's right. Yes, ask as many questions as possible. That's right, until you get the clarity. And I think that this is where this is going to lead us to further discussions with assessment of what it is that students learn as well, right? That students are ultimately responsible for the product. So it's not just a question of copying and pasting of what it is that the ChatGPT is producing, but rather, okay, what did you find out? Well, how come this is meaningful to you? And now we can have a conversation. So ChatGPT again is a tool that's going to help you get there. It's just that their part is up to you. Pedro, please, I see you've unmuted yourself.
The way that I train my colleagues here is that imagine GPT is like an entity on a black box. It doesn't hear, it doesn't smell, it doesn't have any input. And then suddenly there is a voice coming from nowhere says, give me 5 ideas for a birthday present for my wife. Oh, and it was programmed to give an answer. You give you an answer. In the beginning, you will hallucinate tremendously to give an answer. And he'll give you, here's the 5 ideas that you can have for a birthday gift, but has no context. Doesn't know anything about that person. Doesn't know like cultural background, anything. But if you say, ask him, what questions do you need to know to help me? He will give you a lot of questions. So I've been doing this for almost every prompt. I just add that, like, ask me any questions you need to do your best possible job. And sometimes I go through 2-3 rounds of questions. The AI continues to ask for more contexts. Yep. And that saves me so much time, because I guess everyone who interacts with AI here had the experience that you asked it to do something, like write a letter or write me some questions, and then they come back really bad. And then you reiterate, and then you start getting frustrated, and you confront the AI, or you try to sweet the AI by using some of the strategies you guys shared. Sometimes I go the opposite. I say, you're going to be penalized if you don't do this. And sometimes it works. But then I stopped and I think like, okay, I spent 35 minutes fighting with the AI. I could have done this by myself faster. So by using this prompt on asking the context, saves a tremendous amount of time.
That is an excellent way to transition us to our next topic. Thank you, Pedro. And thank you so much, Dr. Linton, for spending the last hour with us. So many people in the chat are saying, oh, I haven't even thought about this way. So opening our minds, facilitating that conversation. It sounds like you're super open for people to contact you. So if you wouldn't mind putting your contact information in chat, if you are. So next we get to go to Mr. Mike Matthews. He is the president of Authentic Education. And with over 2 decades of experience, Mike is a veteran educator who has led significant initiatives to design curriculum that foster deep understanding and real-world applications. Through his leadership at Authentic Education, he has influenced curriculum design globally, using the Understanding by Design framework to empower educators. Today, Mike will discuss how this framework can revolutionize educational strategies by focusing on designing curriculum for understanding rather than for mere content coverage. The floor is all yours, Mike.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Let me get my slides up.
That was a quick transition for you. Sorry, I didn't prep you for that.
No worries. Hi there. Again, wonderful to be here. My name is Mike Matthews. I am the president of Authentic Education. My experience as an educator is primarily working with K-12 schools. As an educator, I got my start as a Teach for America Corps member, teaching in rural North Carolina, have taught kind of across the country in public, charter, and independent schools. And for me, the Understanding by Design framework that I'm going to talk about today is a model of thinking about planning that really transformed teaching and learning for me. Right? I learned about it in my Master's of Curriculum and Instruction program, and kind of stepped away from working in schools after about 20 years, and am now working with educators across the globe. Right, and so I spend a lot of my time working with K-12 educators. I work with pre-K. I work with the folks who are involved in adult learning. And so I'm very excited to be able to share a little bit about Understanding by Design with you today. I think there are, for some of you, when you hear about this framework, that you may want to jump right in and plan a unit. For others, it may be, oh, that's an interesting idea. That's an interesting way to approach thinking about planning and planning for teaching for understanding. And so as I go along through my talk today, I'm going to introduce you at a very high level to the Understanding by Design framework. We're going to grapple with what does it mean to understand and why does it matter? And we're going to look at how the Understanding by Design framework can help you be a purposeful planner. All the resources, I put together some resources that accompany my talk today, everything from the slides to a resource packet to some links for more information. If you're interested, you can find those at ae.padlet.org/Mike/SLO, and the password on there is SLO as well. Thank you, Amanda, for popping that into the chat. When there are moments during the presentation to take a look at something on the Padlet, it will pop up. So I wanna invite you to jump in with me by grappling with this question: what is understanding and why does it matter? As we think about that question, I'm going to give you a prompt. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to think about that prompt. And after everyone's had a chance to think, then we're going to move into a sharing. So resist that initial temptation to put your responses or thoughts in the chat. I want to give everyone a chance to think independently before we share that out. I want you to think not about the area that you teach, though there may be overlap here. I want you to think about a career related to a passion of yours, whether that be if a passion is photography, what does it mean to be a professional photographer? If you're a gardener, what does it mean to be a professional gardener? And thinking about within that profession, someone who truly understands, right? They really have a deep, deep understanding of their field. What are some of the things that they're able to do? And when I ask folks to come back together to share, I'm going to be asking you to share 2 to 3 actions that are related to your thing. Really focus on the actions. For some folks, right, this, if you are not sure where to get started with this, I have put another entry point into this. There's a set of quotes on the Padlet related to understanding. If you want to use that as your entry point, please go ahead and do that. You'll find the packet and it's page 2. But want to give folks about 3 minutes to think about that question, thinking about a career related to a passion of yours, someone who truly understands can blank. Okay. Give it just a few more seconds for folks to think, and then we'll move to the sharing piece of it. Okay, I'm going to ask you to share the actions that you came up with via a tool called Slido. If you go to slido.com and enter in, it'll ask for a hashtag code. You can enter SLO. Alternately, you could also just scan that QR code with a phone and participate directly from there. If you came up with multiple actions, what I want to invite folks to do is to share each action as an individual submission. So submit one, and what we're going to create a word cloud, kind of based upon understanding across these various careers and passions that we came up with. Okay, responses are starting to come in. We'll let the word cloud grow. Kind of the way this tool analyzes the submissions, is it kind of the bigger the word, the more it was shared. The smaller phrases were shared fewer times, right? And so as I look at what kind of came up in what can someone who truly understands do, kind of the big ones that jump out, and yes, I saw in the chat that folks are pulling from Bloom's, of course, right? Apply, teach, explain, analyze, empathize. Anyone want to kind of jump in and share a little bit about what they kind of the career related to the passion that they chose and kind of exactly what that looks like?
Well, I can say that I'm attending this event before I head to a gig tonight. I'm a professional musician as well as a
I think someone was sharing and it got cut off. Clinton, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying my career choice is I'm a musician, so my first action item for me was to learn everything I could about my craft. I went to school, got my degrees, and now I'm a teacher, but also I play 2-3 times a week playing jazz and blues. And after I attend this meeting, I'm going to throw my stuff in my car and head to Sonora and play some jazz with a big band. So
Nice.
that's the application right there.
Right. Wonderful. Right. And it's right. Someone who really understands, right, that it's more than just the notes. It's more than just the skills. It's how it all comes together. Right. And so the Understanding by Design framework offers 6 facets of understanding. And I will say, as an educator, the one that I always went to was application, right? That to me was the part of this that really connected. But one of the things that I really like is using this as a tool to help think even more broadly about what does it actually mean to understand, right? That there's nuance, there's richness that can happen when someone truly understands, right? There's a self-awareness. One of some of the things that came up we saw empathize come up in the word cloud. Understanding by Design is a framework that was created by kind of 2 educators, Jay McTighe and Grant Wiggins. They wrote it about 25 years ago. And it's a framework that is used by schools and institutions across the world. It is a planning framework, right? So it doesn't offer insights into how to teach or what to teach. Instead, it offers insights into how to plan. And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about what does it look like, right? If those things that we saw in the word cloud, right, the ability to empathize, to teach someone else, are the things that we truly value, right? That those are the high level things that we're aspiring towards. What does it look like if we get there, not by chance? What does it look like if we get there by design? That we design all parts of a unit, right? And during my presentation, you'll hear me use the phrase unit. That's kind of the basic planning kind of level of UBD. I'm going to use that interchangeably today with course, right? Unit or course could go. It could be. I could use either one here. In a very traditional content-driven approach, right? This is a lot of how I learned as a student. It's how I learned to teach as a teacher. And it's, right, we in a content-driven approach, we start with what are all of the things that we could teach? What are the skills? What are the things that students could put on flashcards that they need to memorize and be able to recall? Once we know all of those things, how do we figure out how to equip them? What are some of the things that we need to do to build lessons, build lectures that deliver that content and teach them what they need to know? And then at the very end, we better make sure that they know it, and we do an assessment to make sure that the learners know the content that they were supposed to learn. In a content-driven approach, the end result is not inherently understanding. It's a lot of content. And so Understanding by Design offers a perspective on how to, if your ultimate goal is that deep understanding, how do we get there? And what does it look like for us to start our planning process? UBD is a backwards planning model. And in a backwards planning model, we're going to start with the why. Where do we want to go? What do we want our learners to be able to do as a result of their learning? What are those big picture things? What are the things that they will be able to apply or transfer into new situations? Once we know what the why is, we take a step back and say, what are all of the things that we will be able to see? What's the evidence that we will be able to gather from our students that give us clues that they are on the way to the deep understandings that we plan for and their ability to apply their learning in new ways? And then lastly, and only after we've thought about that evidence, do we begin to think about how do we get there? What's the learning plan? And how do we plan learning experiences and instruction that are aligned with the understanding and transfer? UBD has a template, right? That it is a model for planning that guides you through how to think about this. And when kind of Jarek and I were talking about UBD and this series of talks, really stage 1 is all about articulating student learning outcomes, being able to think about what are the things that we want to happen as a result of the learning, and then using that to design the assessments and the learning plan from there. UBD recognizes that there are 4 types of goals. related to learning. One is transfer, being able to apply learning in new and novel contexts. Another are understandings, kind of those are the aha moments, the big picture ideas, things that you can't just tell someone. Those are the kind of bigger ideas that people have to grapple with and come to. It's really about synthesis. And then knowledge and skills are kind of the last two. I think there's a misconception when folks hear about understanding by design that the knowledge and skills don't matter. And it's a misconception because they very much do matter. Really, where they matter is in UBD is that they get context in terms of the understanding and transfer. It becomes more than just individual facts, more than skills that people can drill or practice. So if I were to think about what it looks like to teach a Spanish class and think about these different learning goals, right? The knowledge is really kind of the vocabulary that someone needs to know. The skills are being able to conjugate the verbs that go with that. And only when you have those things can you put that together to make meaning or to understand. And when you have that deep understanding, we can equip you then to apply your learning on your own, to have a conversation with a native speaker, to communicate your needs and understand the needs of others. UBD frames all of this in a hierarchy, right? It uses a pyramid to begin thinking about how this all fits together, right? What the acquisition of skills are the base. And when our learners have acquired the knowledge and have mastered the skills that they need, only then can they make meaning, right? That they can put all of that together, they can reach those aha moments, they can have that understanding and ultimately reach the top of the pyramid, the ability to transfer or apply their learning on their own. If we look at that Spanish example that I showed, kind of the vocabulary, conjugation, and communication with a native speaker, you can see here how that all comes together, right? That the same things that we had in those 4 learning goals are now moved over to the hierarchy in the pyramid, and we begin to see kind of how it all builds on one another. The 3 stages of understanding by design, kind of the first one, as I mentioned, is desired results, and it's really linked to this idea of what are the learning outcomes and prioritizing, identifying learning outcomes that are related to the future, that are grounded in what's ahead. I'm going to show a brief video of Grant Wiggins, one of the co-authors of Understanding by Design, talking about his big aha moment related to transfer and what that looked like. Give me 1 second to make a transition on my audio.
Understanding by design. Well, what is understanding? I taught for many years at Loomis Chaffee, like many of you, good prep school, had a lot of good students, and I was really puzzled by students who were smart, dutiful, showing up for class, clueless. It really puzzled me as a phenomenon. It also became clear to me by design, I was not a good planner. I knew the kind of provocation that I wanted to engage people in. I could plan a lesson, but I had a sense that you could do a better job than this. And really, where I discovered it in a weird kind of parallel universe way, I became a much better planner and teacher on the soccer field than I did in my English class and my philosophy class. Because I was still wedded to the conception of pretty egocentric conception that what we're going to cover and what I want you to understand is central. Even though I was doing Socratic seminar, even though I'd gone to St. John's, where you do seminar, 4 years standing. But it was obvious on the soccer field, you're on the sideline, man. There's nothing you can do. And soccer is one of those great sports. Very fluid, lots of executive decision making, and one of the few sports where you can't call timeout as a coach. You're stuck with what they do. And so there you really see the movement back and forth. We learn some things, we do a little scrimmage, we go to the game, yikes. Back to the drills. True story. When I left Loomis, I was coaching girls varsity soccer, And my co-captain, Liz, was a constant offender. All the things that we'd worked on in drills, she would just run around and be a ball hog and keep doing the same old things. And one day, I tend to be reasonably quiet as a coach. I'll talk to myself, and people will hear me mumbling, but I don't yell at people much. But I was frustrated, and I said, Liz, all the things we've been working on! God's honest truth. She yells back in the middle of the game, freezing everybody on the field. It was like those old E.F. Hutton commercials. We would, Mr. Wiggins, but the other team isn't lining up the way we did the drills. Epiphany. Epiphany. The best way to understand backward design from your goals is through that story. You can teach, you can do exercises, you can do worksheets, you can do assessments, and you think they got it. They don't get it until they try to transfer it in the game. So, by design, we want to plan backward from our goals. And one of our chief goals is something called understanding. But the word that I want you to think about today is transfer. Can the student transfer their learning? Because after all, the point of school is not to get good at school. The point of school is to use what you've learned in school somewhere else. To say it a slightly different way, which is truly troublemaking, the goal is not to see if they learned what you taught. That's not the goal. In fact, that's a trivial goal. That's a mere means. The goal is to see if they can use it when you're gone. In other classes, outside of school, in the future. In other words, it's future directed. It's not what did they learn of what we just covered in the past.
Okay. I love that video, right? I love kind of hearing Grant talk about the soccer example, right? And kind of this is the quote that always jumps out at me because it resonates with me so much, right? As an educator, right? So I taught middle school science. I spent probably 15 years in various grades teaching middle school science. And the thing that I always, would say is, I know that not all of my students are going to go on and be scientists. Probably a fairly small percentage. I don't teach science because I expect all of my students to go on and be scientists. Rather, I teach science because I believe whatever field my students go on into, that there are things inherent in learning science that will equip them for the world ahead, right? There are things that are transferable that they'll be able to apply on their own in new and novel contexts long after they're in my 8th grade science classroom. And so when I was the director of curriculum at a K-8 school in San Francisco for girls, we wanted to launch a coding and computer science curriculum, and kind of one of the challenges that came up was we had a lot of folks who said, well, I don't know how to code. I don't know how to teach that. Well, and I don't know where it fits in, right? I teach world languages. I teach humanities. Where are their connections? And we used understanding by design to really make the case, right? That just like in my science classroom, I didn't expect all of my students to go on and be scientists. We don't expect all of our students to go on and be coders. Rather, we believe that there is more to learning this, and we want to help them be able to apply what they're learning in new ways, right? So using understanding by design, we said that we want students to, on their own and in the long run and on their own, we want them to be able to revise their work, right? Maybe it's a piece of writing, maybe it's a video, maybe it's something that they're producing based on feedback, errors, or evolving needs, maybe a new audience, a new context, a new situation. And then we grounded that in the computer science, right? That I want learners to understand that writing code, like writing written language, is an iterative process and happens over time. And during the units that we were building, coding and computer science were central. It's just that learning the syntax and learning the ability to code wasn't the endpoint, right? That success, mastery, looked like being able to apply things in new ways. Here's another example from my science classroom. I want learners to understand that balancing skepticism with curiosity, scientists seek to make sense of new and unexplained or unexpected phenomenon so that in the long run and on their own, they'll be able to evaluate new situations and discoveries with curiosity and skepticism. And maybe that's a career in science, right? Maybe that's reading a piece of research from a peer, but maybe it's also reading something off of Instagram. Maybe it's looking at that ChatGPT data and saying, I'm not quite sure that that's pointing me in that direction. I'm not quite sure that that's accurate. The science is important only in the context of these bigger ideas. And UBD is a process to be able to get there. When I'm working with, these are big ideas, and the entry point for students into kind of to begin to get to these in UBD is an essential question, right? And so the question that I pose to my students over and over and over again is, how might I make sense of something that doesn't make sense? And by asking that question, by giving new scenarios, new situations, I was able to help them tease out the nuance, go from a very kind of specific, narrow scenario to be able to see these applications, right? Ultimately, when I think about transfer, I am thinking not just about applying the learning in my class. I'm trying to think about what it looks like for them to do it down the road. How does this all come together, right? What does this actually look like? In Understanding by Design, I mentioned earlier that there's a template that we can use to begin to flesh this out. And here's where those three ideas might show up as part of a bigger unit on scientific process skills, right? That we have transfer goals, we have the enduring understandings, we have the entry points into that, the questions that we're going to ask over and over and over again, because we want students to grapple with them. There is no one right answer to those questions. The answer depends on the scenario. Answers will evolve over the course of the course. And only then, only when we have these transfer goals and enduring understanding set do we begin to think about knowledge and skills, because having those high-level outcomes for what we want students to be able to do as a result of their learning helps us prioritize, helps us figure out what are the most compelling examples, what's the content that is the most important to equip students with to be able to do those things. And then kind of once we've articulated those desired results, the outcomes that we want to see as a result of what students are learning, we begin to think about evidence, right? We come up with the why as part of stage one, we move into stage two, and we begin to think about what is the evidence that will give us clues that students are able to apply their learning on their own in new ways. When we think about assessment, right? And this is in my work with teachers, this is often, particularly with high school teachers, one of the biggest challenges, right? The folks seeing assessment and grading as one, right? And the word assessment, right, has roots in Latin from assidere, right? To sit beside, right? So when we think about what it looks like to assess student learning, think about what does it look like to sit beside your student and collect the evidence of their ability to understand, their ability to apply their learning on their own in new ways. It's not about scoring, right? It's not about giving a grade. It's about, can we, as we look at their performance, as we look at their work, are we able to see evidence that they'll be able to apply it down the road? This comes back to kind of Grant's the soccer example, right? That this is the real game is not the course. The real game is not the class. The real game is what they can do on their own when things don't feel familiar, when things don't feel the same, right? When I work with math teachers, right, I will often say this is the difference between giving the same word problem with different numbers or a small set of changes versus giving a brand new problem, a real world scenario that they have to grapple with. And if we've articulated all of the things that we matter, all of those outcomes that we've prioritized as part of our stage 1 work, everything related to transfer, understanding, knowledge, and skills, we better assess it. And so I like to frame this by, as part of our stage 1 work, we've articulated what we value. We've articulated the things that are important. We better make sure that we're assessing that. And from oftentimes, this is a big mindset shift within the understanding by design framework of grappling with what does it look like as an educator for me to assess for transfer? What does it look like, right? I won't be nearby. I won't be able to see them applying their learning 20 years down the road, but what are the clues today that I can see that will give me hints that they'll be able to do it down the road? And so if I think about a fairly traditional assessment arc, right? So back to a forward planned content-driven approach, we might introduce some vocabulary, do a quiz, some sort of assessment to make sure they know it, to introduce a lab, begin to ask students to put that together. But ultimately, right, I mean, I remember this from so many of my kind of classes as a student, that ultimately we were leading up towards a big culminating test where I was just asked one more time, do I get it? Do I know it? Do I know the things that I need to know? Have I memorized the things that I'm supposed to memorize? Can I spit it back? UBD flips that a little bit, right? And UBD says, what if our end goal, if our end goal is ultimately transfer and application, we better shift that. We better have our culminating assessment be about transfer as well. And so, in this example, right, A stands for acquisition of knowledge, skills, M stands for meaning or understanding, and T is for transfer. So one kind of hallmark of the UBD framework is this idea of a culminating assessment of transfer. This is not that the knowledge and skills don't matter. Rather, it's that you've assessed those along the way. You know that they have it. This is a moment to get that clue to the ability to apply down the road and in the future. And if we want our learners to be able to apply during the unit, we also better be giving them chances along the way to practice that. What does this actually look like? A transfer task or a performance task comes at the very end. It is an opportunity for students to apply their learning on their own in new and novel contexts, right? So this is students working individually. This is not just giving a familiar example, but giving a brand new situation, right? So kind of how do we challenge students to think about how do they stretch themselves? How do they look at a new situation and make sense of it? Here is, right, so that heat and heat transfer unit that I was just showing you, UBD offers kind of the grasps, right, a way to design a transfer task to really authentically and accurately assess what's the goal that students are trying to accomplish, what's the role that you're giving them, what's the real world audience, who are they doing this work for, what's the situation that they find themselves in, what's the product, what are they going to actually be producing, and then ultimately what are the standards, what are the things that I'm going to be using to evaluate their ability to transfer. One kind of key idea behind a transfer task is really trying to make sure a transfer task is valid, right? That if we're assessing for transfer, we want to make sure that our learners, right, that neither of these are true, right? Could students do well but be clueless, right? Could they fake it in the blue, or on the red, could they do poorly on the assessment but still get it, right? Are there other things that are coming up that they get it, but there's something about how that task was designed that introduces bias? When I'm working with younger teachers, right, one of the things that comes up is the ability to read or write, right? And how do we think about, how do we remove that as a barrier so you're seeing the student's ability to apply and transfer independent of that? When I was in the classroom, one of the things that I always valued, that I really struggled to let go of, was I would do projects and I really cared what they looked like. So if you looked at a scoring rubric for a project, I evaluated what it looked like. I evaluated kind of how it was presented, kind of how polished it was. And for me, that was a fail on the red circle, right? That I had students who totally got it, but were struggling, right? Were not able to show their learning because of that. And that was something that I really had to struggle to either take in one of two directions. And it's not about just necessarily letting that go. It comes back to that quote of value what you assess, assess what you value. Is that something that I value? And if it's something that I value, I better teach it. And if I teach it, then I'm going to build it into my assessment. If not, it's time to probably let it go because it is clouding my ability to see the deep learning that I planned this unit around. As I said before, right, if you look at this assessment arc with that transfer task at the end, right, you've got all of the assessments. This is a highly simplified assessment arc, but kind of key moments through the unit. The problem with just adding the transfer task at the end is it's like adding one game in a season and having students go to that game, play the soccer game, see how they do, and calling it done. If we don't give students a chance to practice and transfer their learning along the way, we're taking a big risk in our being able to see if they can apply their learning at the end. And so what does it look like? We want to design learning or design assessments along the way that give us clues into their ability to transfer. Here's an example of how simple that can be, right? So I moved that slide. Okay, I'll share the example, right? So I had a heat, coming back to the heat and heat transfer unit, right? The kind of one way of thinking about it is, right, here's a lava lamp is an example of A, conduction, B, convection, C, radiation. Students would have to answer that question, and they had a 1 in 3 shot of getting it right, even if they didn't have any clue. And I didn't have any sense, based upon how they answered that, if they really deeply had that understanding. Take that task, and instead of asking it as a multiple choice question, I flipped it, and I said, you know, what if you imagine that a younger sibling comes to you and shows you a YouTube video of a lava lamp and says, how does this work? Write a written explanation. And it was a moment during the unit for me to see how students' thinking was evolving. Did they get the vocabulary? Were they able to see beyond those individual facts, but be able to put it together? Were they able to apply it to something new on their own in new and novel contexts? The last part of UBD is the learning plan, stage 3. If we've identified the why, figured out the things that we'll see when we know students can apply their learning, what's our plan to equip students to get there? And this is when I work with teachers, and this is an area, right, where great planning in stage 1 to articulate outcomes that are grounded in transfer, understanding, knowledge, and skills doesn't matter, right? It's just an interesting intellectual exercise if you haven't redesigned the teaching, if you haven't redesigned what's happening to equip students for all of those, right? Kind of a quote that I love from Grant is, a collection of events does not ensure a coherent lesson or course over time any more than a pile of bricks automatically results in a solid and aesthetically pleasing building. As a science teacher, I always thought, I was like, wow, I can engage my students so easily. I can do demos. I can have them wowed every day. I can have my students going home saying how much they love science and not particularly learning much because it was just interesting. It wasn't actually connected to my learning outcomes. And so if we are designing our outcomes around transfer, meaning, and acquisition, we want to make sure that we're teaching for those as well. And kind of the last piece of the UBD framework is figuring out how do we design the learning events that are aligned with those goals. And knowing kind of what learning looks like when you're teaching for acquisition versus for transfer is a big challenge, right? And it's what's the role of the teacher? What are your students doing? What are the goals of what's that learning? And this is always a dance, right? Of being able to introduce concepts and know where a lecture fits in, and also knowing that a lecture is probably not going to be teaching for transfer, right? And within UBD, the challenge here is how do you be either align that lecture, right, with ideas of transfer, right? How do you build in questions? How do you build activities? How do you help your learners grapple with the bigger ideas? Or how do you design an alternate learning event, right? Or a subsequent learning event that gets them there. And so that kind of is on a high level of the kind of, those are the big ideas behind the Understanding by Design framework. And I want to take questions now to kind of jump in and grapple with, like, what does this actually look like? I'm hearing lots of folks in the chat kind of reference connections back to Bloom's. Absolutely. Yeah. Amanda, what questions are coming up as folks are engaging in the chat?
Just a lot of back channel chatter agreeing with you. These are great. It's fantastic things to apply. So given that many of us are either some sort of outcomes coordinators, assessment coordinators, have to do with training of faculty. So what are some of the key components if we're engaged in training faculty? And even though to all of us this seems so why wouldn't you do this? What are some of the key components to help implement a UBD framework into higher education? And sorry, Vernon, I didn't see your hand after I started talking.
No, it went up as you were talking.
Okay. Yeah, so Amanda, that's a great question, right? And so I think for some you might want to jump right into the framework, right? And Grant and Jay created some incredible books, right? And they're linked to on the Padlet that are great ways to jump in planning. I always caution folks, though, to not think about UBD as a bunch of boxes to fill in, right? That I think UBD really has some power when it's about mindsets, right? I will often talk about the intersection of curriculum change and culture change. And when we're asking educators to think differently about what's happening in their classroom, we're not just filling in boxes. We're not just changing what's being taught. We're changing the culture. We're changing classroom culture. We're changing faculty culture, and you have to grapple with that. And so kind of for folks who are new to UBD, there are a couple of things that I would offer, right, as possible next steps for things you might bring to those conversations that you're having. And I put two resources related to this in the resource packet that I put on the Padlet, and we'll get that link back in there in a moment. And the first is, there's an activity on the very last page called "What's the Point?" And it is I see that as a really powerful entry point into helping folks think about the bigger picture. And so it's a graphic organizer that has 8 questions. So Amanda, as I think about going into a conversation with a colleague, right, to help them begin thinking beyond the knowledge and skills, one thing that I would recommend is pulling in the graphic organizer and saying, okay, let's look at this together. Let's talk through this. If we had to justify this course to our institution, if we had to make the case, or if a student asked, why are we learning this? Why is this important? What would our answer be? And what are the applications beyond beyond a career in the field? What are applications in other areas? And it's a tool that I think is a great entry point. That's, I think, on the 5th page of the resource guide. Thank you, Amanda, for popping that link in. There's also, I put in there, and I mentioned mindsets, I think are far more powerful part of this work than filling in boxes. And on page 3, there's kind of 8 big mindsets that underlie the UBD framework. And so I would point to that as another potential entry point, right? To sit down with a colleague and to begin to say, which of these resonate? Which of these things do you think already show up in what you're doing in your courses, in your classroom, and which might be one to focus on, another area to think about. I think the power of questions and the types of questions that we're asking is kind of probably a third and particularly compelling entry point as well, that I've seen folks have lots of success in coaching roles coming in with, let's look at the questions you're asking, and what do we see? What are some of the things that we notice? as we look at those questions, what is a student who can answer those well? What does that actually tell us about what they're learning? Is it aligned with the content? Is it aligned with understanding, or is it aligned with something bigger, right? Transfer or application, and using those conversations as an entry point far before you ever introduce the UBD template.
Awesome. Thank you. Helpful for me, as I'm a instructional designer and outcomes coordinator. So selfishly, that's super helpful.
Yeah. And so like I was working with kind of earlier this year, I was working with a research journal, right? And that was highly scientific, right? And so when they were working with their scientists, they were getting back, right? Like, what does success look like? They were getting back like 120 slide PowerPoints that had all of the things that folks needed to know. And I recommended, right? Like we tailored some of the questions in the what's the point activity for them to embark. Like before we even open up that slide deck, what's the point? What are the things that transcend any individual fact that bring this all together? Because then you have a very different conversation when you actually go into the content, because you begin to see what matters and how to prioritize that.
Very much so. Thanks. Thanks for
Vernon.
your patience, Vernon.
Oh, sure. So I am a department chair for philosophy and humanities, and I love backwards design. It was sort of a key for me too in transforming my pedagogy, and it kind of made everything make more sense, and actually made my teaching easier, since teaching philosophy, there's no end to the amount of which you can discuss content ideas, right? So it really helped me with that focus. What I struggle with is for, in particular, some of my humanities colleagues in really coming up with the whole idea of what it means to transfer this knowledge. And so I wonder if you have any experience with the more those types of disciplines, the humanities disciplines, where the transfer is like in STEM or something like that. It's really obvious. It's really easy for those faculty to this is what they should be able to do out when they finish this class, right? But for humanities, it's very difficult. And oftentimes I've had these conversations where I'm just really trying to get them, they're the subject area experts in the humanities, get them to kind of articulate this. And sometimes, frankly, the conversation ends with I don't know.
And well, what do you do when it ends with I don't know? I don't know where it fits in. Where do they go from there, in your experience?
That's exactly what I'm asking you.
Yeah. Okay.
I said well, I guess think about it some more. It's a very content driven discipline in a way. Or the courses are very content driven. Like, we're going to learn about this, but what does it mean to transfer that? Yeah.
Well, so science can be a very content driven discipline as well, right? And so when I work with humanities teachers, particularly history, for example, right, the endless events, an endless list of examples that you can look at. I like to come back to the kind of, as we look at different examples, right? So that if someone has a unit, Vernon, right, or a course that they planned out, right, I might start by asking, right, kind of as you look at the pieces along the way, what are the connections? Kind of what are the aha moments that at the end of the unit, right, you get really excited, right, when your students kind of raise their hand and share something. What is that? And kind of thinking about the student experience that way, and the aha moments, I think, can sometimes be an entry point, right? Because you've got to get folks to step back away from the content, right? And it's because it can be maddening, right? Because there will always be more. There will always be more that you could cover, and it's that question of what's. I mean, we know that retention of facts is right. Like, folks will forget, right? all of the details, right? And I mean, I worked with a chemistry teacher on that who made their students memorize the periodic table and then took them on a field trip to a biotech firm where there were periodic tables up on the wall. And one of the students said, "Why do you have that up on the wall? Because you have to memorize that in middle school. What do you, right? Like, why do you have that up there?" And they're like, "Oh, it's a resource. When we need it, we look to it, right? Because it's not about those individual ideas, but the big picture." Some concrete things that I might recommend, right? I actually love working with folks who are outside of my subject area because it gives me some distance from the content, right? The ability, right? Like you're the subject matter expert. Let's look for like if this course were trimmed down, right? If you had half the time, COVID gave folks a lot of opportunities in these areas. When you had to make cuts, when you had to focus on a few things, what were the most compelling examples to focus on, and why? Does that help?
I think it helps a little bit. I think it's more of for certain, when I said humanities, I'm talking about sort of like religious studies, mythology courses, things like that. That history seems like it would be a little easier nut to crack, but something like that, like, well, what's the value of learning the Epic of Gilgamesh? Like, what is that? So I think for some of that, I found it is valuable to have them as an instructor, as the faculty, go back and articulate what did you get from that as a student? Like, why was that? What stuck for you? What stood out to you? And then trying to draw out, well, what is the value of that? And then how can we continue to use that as the transfer goal in these other sort of looking at different cultural myths, like, because you can't keep applying the same transfer thing. You want it to have a different value as you move along through the course.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's been my
like that.
approach, is to try to have them go back in time.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, for these, a lot of faculty have internalized the value so much just because they've bought in, they're academics, right? They don't know what it's like to be a student in that, and just be like, why am I learning this again? They haven't really, there's like, because it's important, they haven't even really unpacked that in a way that relates to students. So this all really is a process for them that's really challenging to facilitate in a conversation, because it kind of sounds like you're challenging them, right? Like, you need to like demonstrate the value of your program.
Yeah.
So great, fantastic discussion. This is exactly very much in line with what it is that we talk in Friday SLL Talks. Going back and forth with Amanda here in the chat, and the question that I would have is perhaps that the question that could be asked. It's first of all, when you address the issue of value or understanding of this aha moment, what are you getting out of this in terms of skills and competencies, right? What are you learning from this? Because ultimately, this is what Mike was alluding to earlier, right? What it is that we do after the class. So the class can cover, the course can introduce students to concepts and ideas, but the bottom line is, okay, now what? And you can, I mean, these days you can even ask ChatGPT, right? What are the skills and competencies that students are going to get out of the Gilgamesh story? And here they are. There is the empathy, comparative analysis, ethical reasoning, communication skills, creativity, and imagination. All of these could be broken down into smaller steps that we may call objectives or student learning outcomes, whatever is that we want to do. But those are specific things that can be described as observable behavior. So again, going back to Bloom's taxonomy, right? And that's probably that would be my suggestion, that this would probably lead us to some sphere that would keep the discussion about how much content do we have to cover in the course at bay. Because again, Mike said it more than once already today. That's not the point. The point is not for us to cover, but figure out what it is that students can do, what can they demonstrate, what can they show, what they can showcase at the end of the course, and how they transfer that knowledge, that skill, the competency for the benefit of their future.
And this is why I think, right, that some feel very threatened by ChatGPT, right, and very scared of it, right? I gave a talk about 7 years ago that was, if the answer is Googleable, is the question worth asking, right? Which was ultimately a talk about the value of knowledge, right? Today, right, ChatGPT can go one step further, right? It can do that synthesis, right? So the version of it today is, if ChatGPT can answer the question, is it worth asking? And I'm so excited to hear the discussion that came up in the first half of our time together today as part of Kristen's talk, right? Because I feel like so often there's hesitancy about going there, right? That it's an all or nothing. And kind of hearing folks grapple with, like, how do we, being able to evaluate the effectiveness and accuracy of a ChatGPT answer is a pretty high level skill. I've gone in and I've said, create me a UBD unit on this for this grade, and it puts together something that's quite compelling until you dig into it, right? That you really have to have some deep understanding of what transfer actually is to begin to grapple with, like, oh, that's not really that, right? That's not an essential question. That's a question that has one right answer. We're not going to see tremendous variation from student to student or year to year. Let's go there and figure out how do we push folks to be more purposeful with ChatGPT. I'm so excited to hear kind of the where folks are in that work and kind of the intersection between my work and Kristen's work.
Wow, this is really cool. Again, this is a great summary of what it is that we are doing in Friday SLO Talks. That's the topic that we've always been discussing at length. The focus on what it is that students can actually do as a result of instruction. So UBD certainly lends itself to further discussion. So thank you very much for again showing us that clip. It's very revealing. Thank you for your insights, Mike. This just has been absolutely fantastic. Anybody else who would like to have any questions? Oh, Vernon, please go ahead.
Oh, there just seems to be this sort of tension or conflict between what I understand is scaffolding and then really challenging them in these novel situations. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I see it as a both and, right? That I see, right, the ultimate goal of transfer, right, has the scaffolding removed, right? And the only way we're going to get there, right, is it's not zero sum, right? It's not, you can't transfer and all of a sudden you can, right? So this is, for me, Vygotsky, right? The idea of zone of proximal development and a more knowledgeable other, right? How do I as an educator along the way provide that coaching, provide that support, provide appropriate scaffolding that begins to go away, right? That as the scaffolding and structure is scaled back, that's a great clue that you're moving towards higher level thinking. That's a great clue that you're building towards understanding and moving from kind of being that kind of on the side partner coach that's helping and thought partner to equipping students to be able to do it on their own. And so the scaffolding is so important. But if you have a transfer task at the end, right? If you're doing a culminating assessment that has all of those scaffolding supports in, what you're assessing is your students' ability to transfer their learning when scaffolding is in place. You don't have a great clue of what they can do if it's not there. And so the more you can get to to that, the better, right? I mean, I get to work with folks who are working with all ages, right? And so my answer to that question is very different when a teacher of 2-year-olds asked me about what that looks like for scaffolding and sight words last week versus what it looks like to look for adult learners, right? And kind of what an appropriate level of scaffolding looks like. It's got to be there, right? It's part of great teaching, but it can't. You've got to. Your students won't have that, right, in the future. You've got to give them chances to not have it now.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, so
That-
Amanda, I see I'm looking at your comment, right? And peer scaffolding in some contexts. Yeah. I mean, that is all right. Like project-based learning, right, is right when I kind of coached folks on that, and folks immediately worry, right? Like, well, my project is group work, right? Like, what am I able to see? And I mean, all of those things, right? When there is a group project, how do you know if students, right? This comes back to those 2 circles and the validity test. Are my students able to apply their learning on their own, or am I getting other data, right? Or something biasing what I'm seeing? And that's the power of a transfer task, right? It's not necessarily doing another project, but it's giving individual students a new data set, right? A new moment to be able to do it on their own that you hope reinforces and confirms everything you've seen in that group setting. And if it doesn't, it's a moment to step back and be like, oh, there's some reteaching here, or oh, we didn't get there. How do I spiral that into the next part of our course?
Yep, I come from early childhood was my foundational discipline, taught many years before transferring to instructional design. So yeah, you speak my language. I love all of that.
Yeah.
And we had a request to put your contact information in the chat before we close up, if you don't mind. And so with that, I always hate when we have to leave. It's 12 o'clock, we gotta go. So I'll go ahead and close this up. Please reach out to Mike if you have any further questions. And we just want to thank you on behalf of coaches, Mike, for being here, Dr. Linton also for your earlier presentation, and everybody that came. 2 hours is long on a Friday afternoon, but it's so great information. It just seems to go by so fast. So appreciate everybody's time, and especially our very valued speakers. And we will see everybody hopefully next week, and enjoy the rest of your Fridays.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.